Hello, students! So far, we've spent a lot of time understanding what democracy is, right? We've looked at all the different features, but today we're going to ask a much deeper question, a very practical one. What does democracy actually do? What does it achieve in real life?
Let's start with something I'm sure you've all experienced. We are always told that democracy is the best system of government, much better than a dictatorship or a king's rule. And we believe it, right? But think about our daily conversations. We're always complaining about the government, aren't we? About how slow things are, about the problems we see. So how can we believe it's the best, but also be so unhappy with it? Well, let's try and solve this puzzle together.
Okay, to get to the bottom of this, we first need to be very clear on one important word: outcomes. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about the outcomes of democracy? This is a really key concept for this chapter.
It's quite simple, really. Outcomes just means the results, the real-world impact that a democratic government has on our lives. We're moving beyond the textbook definition now. We want to see how democracy affects you and me, the citizens, in our everyday lives.
All right, so if we're going to judge democracy by its outcomes, we first need to ask, what do we even expect from it? What are the big promises that democracy makes to us? Let's recap some of the things we've already learned.
So here are some of the big ones. We expect democracy to promote equality among all citizens. You see this in the idea of one person, one vote, right? We also expect it to enhance the dignity of every single person, no matter who they are. We hope that because many people are involved in discussions and debates, it leads to better quality decisions. And this is a big one. It should provide a way to solve conflicts without violence, through courts or debates in parliament. And finally, and this is so important, it allows us room to correct mistakes. If a government does something wrong, we have the power to vote them out in the next election. These are our expectations.
Now, we can actually group all these expectations into two buckets. On one side, we have moral reasons. This is when we value democracy for what it is. We believe in it because it's based on fundamental values like freedom, dignity, and equality. It's just the right thing to do. On the other side, we have prudential reasons. Now, prudential is just a fancy word for practical. These are reasons based on results. We value democracy for what it does. It leads to better decisions, it helps manage conflicts, and it creates stability. So one is about the principle, the other is about the practice.
Okay, so this brings us right back to our original puzzle. If democracy promises all these wonderful things, both morally and practically, why are we so often disappointed with it? Let's really look at this gap between the promise and the reality. Your textbook has a line that just perfectly sums up this feeling. It says, democracy is seen to be good in principle, but felt to be not so good in its practice. I want you to really think about that sentence. The idea of democracy is beautiful, but the day-to-day experience can often feel, well, a bit frustrating. And that's where our complaints come from.
Let's take a very common example. A lot of people believe that if we have a democracy, our country will automatically become rich and poverty will disappear. But is that really what democracy is supposed to guarantee? Is that a fair expectation? Well, to answer that, let's look at some actual evidence.
Now, take a close look at this table. It compares the economic growth rates between 1950 and 2000. And what you see might surprise you. If you look at all dictatorial regimes, their average growth rate was 4.42%. For all democratic regimes, it was 3.95%, a little bit less. Even if we look just at poor countries, the story is similar. Dictatorships had a slightly higher rate of economic growth. Now, when people see this data, they often start to wonder, is democracy really the best for a country's economy? And this right here brings us to what I believe is the most important idea in this entire chapter. To make sense of that data and our feelings of dissatisfaction, we have to clear up a very common misunderstanding about what democracy really is. Okay, please pay close attention to this. The first thing we must recognize is that democracy is just a form of government. It's a system. It's a framework. It is not a magic wand that you can just wave and make poverty or corruption disappear. It just doesn't work that way.
So what does it do then?
Well, this is the key. Democracy can only create the conditions for us to achieve something. Think of it like a farmer. Democracy provides fertile soil and good weather. It creates the right conditions. But the farmer, that's us, the citizens, we still have to plant the seeds, water the crops, and do the hard work. Democracy gives us the tools like freedom of speech and the right to vote, but we are the ones who have to use those tools to build a better country.
So, if that's the case, if democracy only creates the conditions, then how should we judge it? How can we say if it's a success or a failure? This means we need to look at our own complaints from a completely new angle.
Now, this might sound strange at first, but listen closely. Our complaints are not a sign that democracy has failed. In fact, they are proof that it is succeeding. Think about it. The very fact that you and I can openly criticize the government, that we can protest, that we can demand better, that itself shows that democracy is working. Try doing that in a dictatorship. Your voice would be silenced.
This is because democracy does something amazing. It transforms people from the status of a subject into that of a citizen. What's the difference? A subject in a kingdom has to just obey the king's orders. But a citizen has rights. A citizen has a voice. A citizen has expectations. So when you feel dissatisfied and you speak up, that's not just complaining. That is the voice of an aware, empowered citizen taking part in democracy.
So, this brings us back to our big question. Let's think about that economic data again. Should we judge democracy only by economic growth, or should we also consider the dignity and the freedom it gives us? I want you to really think about this. Is a little bit more economic growth worth giving up your freedom to speak, your personal dignity, and your right to choose who governs you?
And this is the core of the argument. Democracy is far, far superior to any other form of government when it comes to promoting the dignity and freedom of an individual. This passion for respect, for freedom, these are the foundations of democracy. And that's an outcome you can't measure with money, but it is incredibly valuable, isn't it?
So how should we assess democracy's outcomes then? As we've seen, it's not a simple tick-box exercise. It's not a simple yes or no. Judging democracy requires us to be patient and to look at the whole picture, not just one or two things like economic growth.
To do it fairly, there are 3 things we need to keep in mind. First, understand its limits. Remember, it only creates conditions. It's not a magic wand. Second, always compare it with the alternatives. Is it better than a dictatorship? Is it better than military rule? For most of us, the answer is a clear yes. And third, and this is the most important one, we need to be critical citizens. We need to use the rights that democracy gives us to demand improvement and to make our democracy even better.
Now, this entire discussion sets the perfect stage for what we're going to explore next. We'll start looking at some specific outcomes we expect from democracy, beginning with one of the most basic ones, an accountable and responsive government. We'll dive into that in our next session.